It's time to hit the construction site, so don't go away. Hello everyone and welcome to Fat Guy Productions. I am Paul, coming to you as always from beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. Today, we're turning our attention to a Matchbox so many others have already done, the Matchbox number 30, the 8-wheel crane. Now, it is odd that I haven't done one of these yet. I have several of them, and they're all in, well, pretty rough shape. They desperately are in need of some loving. So today, I'll right that wrong. Let's get to work. Well, here's my musty little 8-wheel crane. As you can see, the paint is horrible. The boom arm of the crane is loose and bent. It's just really not in great shape. The only thing I can say for it is it's complete, but even there, the hook kind of sucks. I'm probably going to replace it. Okay, so I'm going to start out on this build by getting it apart. I need to get the little front undercarriage off. I need to get the crane off. I need to remove the wheels and axles and the hook. I'll start by drilling out the two posts. One holds the front carriage and the other holds the crane. So clearly my little casting needs a lot of help, but as a vehicle, this crane truck is actually very, very cool looking. I love the look of it. It's going to be a lot of fun to bring it back to life. Now, Matchbox didn't do a great job with it. I wish it had some glass. The paint, this green and orange thing, it's just not working. Maybe if it was a good green and a good orange, you know, maybe it would look okay. But it really doesn't, so I'm not going to repeat the mistake they made. I'm going to do my own thing here. But at the end of the day, it is a very good-looking vehicle, and hopefully I can do it some justice. Well, I do have plans to replace the hook. I've got one on order, but I'm still going to try and take this off carefully you never know when you might need it in a pinch. So I'm going to get it off. I'm going to put it aside and save it. As to getting the wheels and axles off, I'm just going to cut them. They're really, really rusty. There's no point to trying to save them. So the front undercarriage piece, it's attached to a really short post. Honestly, too short to drill and screw into, so I'm going to end up having to glue that back in place. But the crane does need to be drilled out and tapped so that it'll take a screw when we put it back together. And now, one of the legendary double goo drops. Here we go. Into the warm liquid goo goes the body. Down she goes. And she is quickly followed up by the crane. Goodbye. So I have the parts out of the stripper, and before I go too much further, I want to address the bend in the crane, because if I break this, then there's no sense in putting a lot more work into it. So I'm going to try and deal with that right now. I have a piece of oak, and I'm using that as almost like a little anvil, a soft anvil, I guess you could call it. And I've got this little hammer, and I'm just going to kind of gently try to tap this back into position, and it actually works out all right. If it was a lot worse, I would probably have heated that up, but I really don't think I needed it here, so I just kind of banged it back into shape, and it worked out fine. Now, I really don't know why. I have primed this with my Tamiya Fine Primer, and this is such a horrible shot. I'm trying to adjust the light so you can see it by the left warning light on the roof. See those dots there? For some reason, when I put the primer down, it just like pulled away from those areas. You know, and I washed it, I cleaned it, everything. You know, I don't know what it's doing. So I actually had to go back and forth with this thing several times. I would wire brush it, I would clean it with alcohol, I would wash it in soap and water, I would wash it in water. I tried everything. I primed this thing like 8 times, and it still just never came out right. And it did it on a spot on the crane arm too. So I really don't know why it was doing that. Nothing I would do made it any better. I ended up using a different primer, and that kind of filled it in a little bit, but really I'm left perplexed. I don't know why it was doing that. So the roof isn't going to be perfect. There's some anomalies there that I just could not get to go away. Anyhow, over at the paint booth, I can now lay down the Tamiya X8 Lemon Yellow. Get this whole thing in bright American construction equipment yellow. And now I'm just going to throw on some of my clear coat. Clear coat, you say? Why would you do that? You never clear coat matchboxes. Well, that's true. I generally don't put clear coat over one of my Matchbox builds because I think the Tamiya comes out with a really close to original looking finish. But I don't know, there's just something about this one that I want it to be nice and shiny. So after I got the lemon yellow, I am using my urethane clear coat that I get from Brightvision, And I'm putting it down in the normal manner, the mist coats, the medium coats, and then some nice, beautiful wet coats. And it's going to give this thing an awesome shine. So I'm doing a little bit of detail painting here earlier than I normally would. And what I'm doing is I'm painting down some Molotow chrome over the emergency lights and the headlights and a few single spots on the crane arm. And I'm doing this for a reason. I want the Molotow on the emergency lights to dry, because after they're dry, I'm going to go over it with some Tamiya clear orange to give it a really nice look to the emergency lights. So I need it to dry, so I'm going to get it on now. That way it has plenty of time to be thoroughly dry before I go on to painting the orange. So I told you how rusty the axles were, and I can't get them out of the tires. So I'm using a slightly bigger tire, putting this tire on it and using my little hammer to kind of pound that axle down far enough so I can get a hold of it with some needle nose pliers and wrest it free from the wheel. Yes, I had to do that to all 8 of those little suckers. So I took 8 rivets and I cut them down and grinded them thinner, because the rivets, the 1/8 inch thick rivets, are actually a bit too big for most Matchbox wheels. You have to kind of chuck them up in a drill and spin it against a file and thin those down so that they'll work as axles. Well, I did that, and I did 8 of them because I wanted the end to be the same on all 8 wheels. And that meant 8 separate rivets and axle tubes. So all I'm doing here is I'm cutting down some brass tubing to fit on the bottom of the truck, both on the body and that little chassis piece. And I'll put these 4 tubes in, and then I'll glue the axles into the tubes. It should give a nice consistent look all the way around. You know, I know it's not really authentic, and if I was going for a complete straight restoration, I probably wouldn't do it this way. But since I'm doing sort of a custom, I want it to look consistent all the way around. I also think this is a little bit easier than trying to hammer out the end of the axle to flare it so it will hold back on. I think this is a little easier, cleaner, neater, and so this may be something that I choose to use a lot more in the future. So once I have everything kind of close, I'm just going to do some test fitting and make sure everything's going to work out. And it's a good thing I did, because on the little bogie piece, this little front chassis piece, there's a difference between the front axle and the rear axle of it, and the tube won't fit in the front axle. I needed to actually modify the little brass tube and file down a big chunk of it so it would sit flat and a little bit lower, and I needed to make the opening cast into that base a little bit bigger so that I had room. So it was a good thing I did a little bit of a test fit here before trying to glue everything together. Otherwise, I would have been met with a giant headache. So now to put the wheels back on, I've got the axle tubes in place. And with a toothpick, I put a little bit of my gel control CA glue inside the tube, and then I'm going to put a little bit of it on the end of the axle and carefully put these together so that hopefully everything will continue to spin after I get it all together. So caution, moving slow, it's the key word here. Okay, so the wheels are all back on. I've screwed the crane arm onto the body. And now I'm going to break out that Tamiya clear orange, and I'm just going to paint over the emergency lights on the roof. And it should look really fantastic with that Molotow chrome underneath that clear red. It should really give it almost a luminescent look. So I found this hook on eBay, it came out of Canada, and I have to say, I'm really, really pleased with it. It is perfect. It looks like something maybe Matchbox made. It looks like new old stock or something like that. So I'm going to get it out, and all you have to do is just kind of slide it in to the end of the arm and pull it down, and it will seat itself. It's got kind of a little bevel, and it'll just kind of pop into place. It's a lot easier to put it on than it was to get it off, I can tell you that. Anyhow, despite having to really struggle to get a decent paint layer on here, I had a lot of fun with this, and it came out great, I think. I think it looks amazing in this yellow. So that's the end of this project. Let's take a look and see what we have. Well, there you have it, my Matchbox 8-wheel crane in a great construction yellow. It's funny how the simplest castings can often give you the most problems, and this little crane is a great example of that. Still, I managed to get it done, and in the end, I love the look of it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please give it a thumbs up, click subscribe, and be sure to click the notification bell so you never miss one of my diecast builds. As always, questions and comments, you know where they go, down below. Well, that's it for today. Always remember to work hard in silence and let your success make the noise. Until next time, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions saying, be good.